What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's installment on The Lake Show, and I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day again. So last week, I made my first NFL mock draft of the entire first round. I made my thoughts, my predictions on what teams, who I thought they were going to draft in this upcoming draft in April, at the end of April. Now, I had a lot of kind of pushback a little bit from certain people I know just based on how the draft went. But again, I'd like to reiterate the last mock draft I made did not include any trades whatsoever. But what are we going to talk about this week? Well, there's a lot of news in the NFL right now, and we're going to talk about it. And there are some rumors, so stay tuned to the end of the show. I think we're going to do about 25 to 30 minutes this episode, but be sure to stay till the end of the video because there's a rumor going around, and I think it's kind of fascinating when it comes to certain quarterbacks and where they could possibly end up and draft pick implications because of that. And as you all know, I'm a Bucked Up ambassador, so use promo code SHOW32. Get yourself 20% off any and all pre-workout orders at buckedup.com. So, obviously, I forgot to mention this last week. I hope you guys like my new setup. So, shout out to my family for allowing me to use the room. And I think it turned out pretty good. I think I got a couple more tweaks to make. I'm trying to get my own poster and everything. That way I can put it up on the back of this wall. And yeah, it's just so much fun seeing that I finally have a place to where I can just go in whenever I feel like it and record. Because honestly, I think my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ every single day for being allowed to do this. It's a fun time. It's like an escape from, the world we live in. And, he's given me so many blessings in my life. And last week's episode did fantastic for a 30-minute episode. Again, I really appreciate you all for all the love and support. And I ask, if you're not subscribed already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and make sure to like it and make sure to share with a friend. You're really helping out the channel. I'm trying to grow this into something awesome, an unbiased sports talk show. Somewhat, because we all have our own bias towards our own teams and our own narratives. So I just really appreciate you all for all the love and support, and we are over 200 subscribers. My next goal is 300, obviously, so if you could, be sure to smash that subscribe button and smash that like button. You're really helping out the channel. So without hesitating anymore, let's get started. So obviously, there's been rumors going around that Matthew Stafford could possibly be traded to the Giants or could be traded to the Titans or wherever. There's been just a lot of rumors swirling about the old veteran quarterback who is still, in my opinion, a top 10 quarterback in this league. So with that being said, this past weekend, quarterback Matthew Stafford actually got his contract restructured to stay in LA with the Rams. And I think this was honestly the best case scenario for both parties, for both the Rams and for Matthew Stafford. If there's one thing we can all agree on, Matthew Stafford, he has been so overlooked his entire career simply because when he was in Detroit, it was an absolute dumpster fire. Everybody scrutinized Matt Stafford for not being able to do much in Detroit. Well, if you look back on those rosters that Matthew Stafford had to deal with back then, he had Calvin Johnson, never had a run game, never had a decent offensive line, and only 1 year when Ndamukong Suh was an absolute menace on the defensive tackle position did they have a stout defense. But that was only 1 year out of the 9 years that Matthew Stafford spent in Detroit. So I obviously felt that when he went to LA, I predicted it years ago that he would have won a Super Bowl with the Rams, which he indeed did after beating Joe Burrow in the Super Bowl. But looking at it now, at this point in time, now obviously Cooper Kupp's up in age. You have Puka Nacua, who's a little bit injury prone. The offense really isn't what it was back when they made that Super Bowl run. Cooper Kupp's older. Puka Nacua is now on the team. And Odell Beckham's no longer there. And Odell Beckham still had some juice back then. And they had an okay run game. But going forward now, I think this is the best move that Stafford, his agent, and the Rams could have possibly made was to make sure that Matthew Stafford stayed in LA. Now, I have no doubt that the Rams would have been able to get a haul for Matthew Stafford and possibly the first overall pick if Tennessee really wanted Matthew Stafford. But I think the Rams, they're honestly primed and locked and loaded to make a Super Bowl run soon. And honestly, it could be even this year. I think the Rams are a legit dark horse candidate for the Super Bowl, at least for the Super Bowl representative coming out of the NFC. If you look at that defense, the Rams have done nothing but hit and hit and hit off draft picks that they have had over these past couple years. And when you look at the defense that this past year was able to produce, yeah, it looked sluggish in the beginning, but star standouts like Jared Verse, who just won Defensive Rookie of the Year, and you also have another rookie in Cameron Kitchens, who are just blossoming into something special on that defense. The defense is only going to get better. They are young and they are hungry, and I think they have all the tools they need necessary to compete in the NFC. People forget that the Rams were driving in a snowstorm in Philadelphia to beat the Eagles. That was well within their grasp. I know the Eagles ended up pulling the game out, and, blew the brakes off of Washington and then beat the brakes off of Kansas City in the Super Bowl. But the only team in the postseason that gave Philadelphia like a run for its money was the Rams. And part of that is because of Matthew Stafford and that young, stout defense that LA has. So it makes perfect sense to me that they would want to get a deal done and restructure Matthew Stafford to keep him on the team. He's a great leader. He's a great veteran to have. He's a Super Bowl champion, and I think this will do wonders for his legacy as a quarterback. If you look back and look at all these quarterbacks that are older in age, obviously the generation that I and many of you grew up in, that generation's almost over. The last two remnants of that great era of football that we have been accustomed to for 10 to 15 years and 20 years almost is Matthew Stafford and Aaron Rodgers. Now, a lot of people are going to say that Aaron Rodgers overall is a better quarterback than Matthew Stafford and had a better career than him. Is that so? Is that really so? Can you imagine if Matthew Stafford had, came to LA when Sean McVay first got to the Rams? I mean, don't forget, Sean McVay got Jared Goff to a Super Bowl when everybody thought he was washed and everybody thought he was a guaranteed draft bust. Now, Jared Goff is an actual top 10 quarterback in my opinion, and the head honcho at the Detroit Lions. But when you compare Matthew Stafford to Aaron Rodgers, I honestly think here's the one thing. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers has more MVPs than Matthew Stafford. I don't believe Stafford Stafford doesn't have a single MVP, but Stafford already has as many Super Bowls as Aaron Rodgers does in his career. Can you imagine if Matthew Stafford wins one more Super Bowl with the Rams? I think he ends up surpassing Aaron Rodgers on the all-time great quarterbacks list. Now, from a talent perspective, I'm not going to deny that Aaron Rodgers is probably a top 3 most talented quarterback we've ever seen, especially in his prime. But Matthew Stafford staying in LA, I think this will do wonders for his legacy and realistically propel him probably ahead of Aaron Rodgers and his, career accomplishments, because a lot of people measure accomplishments based off Super Bowls, based off championships. Dan Marino won some MVPs. He doesn't have a Super Bowl at all. Drew Brees has a lot of MVPs. He only has one Super Bowl for it. There's just a lot of aspects that go into, the narratives of how great a quarterback truly was. Now, I'm of the firm believer that it's a perfect mesh between coaching schemes and quarterback play, which is why I think Patrick Mahomes is one of the best ever, and is why I still think Brady is the greatest of all time and will never be surpassed. But Matthew Stafford has a chance to propel himself to another level when it comes to all-time great quarterbacks. I'm not going to say Matthew Stafford's a top 10 all-time. Maybe, possibly. Really depends on other quarterbacks that you're looking at. But Matthew Stafford has as many Super Bowls as Steve Young and Aaron Rodgers. So when you look at that, I think staying in LA is the smartest choice for Matthew Stafford. I think it was now obviously he wanted more guaranteed money. They rejected his initial, bargaining agreement. They rejected his initial proposal, but they came back and they worked out a deal right before the NFL Combine. So that's the Matthew Stafford story. He is staying put in LA, and the first major domino of quarterbacks has fallen already, and we are just getting underway real soon for NFL free agency and the draft right around the corner. So how is this going to shape up the NFC in the future to come? Well, I think the Rams are going to be primed and ready to be a dark horse contender for the Super Bowl. All right, now we're going to talk about an interesting trade that just took place, and that is the Washington Commanders traded a 5th-round draft pick for this year to the San Francisco 49ers for Deebo Samuel. As much I like Deebo Samuel a lot. I thought he was on a trajectory, that very few players can achieve, because he was like the ultimate Swiss Army knife when it comes to NFL players. He can play running back, he can play the slot, he can play the X, he can play the Y. You can line him up anywhere in the backfield and he'll deliver as an elite NFL player. Now, injuries a little bit later on in his career obviously have hindered him. He didn't really play much last year. But when you look at the NFL draft right now, tell me you would not be able to find a Deebo Samuel in the 5th round of this year's draft. It's possible, but more than likely not going to happen. So I completely support this Washington trading a 5th-round pick. The fact that you only had to trade a 5th-round pick for a guy like Deebo Samuel, if he stays healthy, Washington's in the race for the Super Bowl immediately. If he's healthy, him with Terry McLaurin and obviously sensational Jaydin Daniels at quarterback, who basically is revolutionizing what we expect from rookie quarterbacks coming into the NFL now, Washington's going to be scary. Washington is going to be knocking on the door of the Super Bowl. And I have no doubt in my mind that Washington will be a perennial contender for the next 5 to 10 years with Jaydin Daniels at the helm, especially since he's still on his rookie deal and he already got to the NFC title game, which is funny because Dak Prescott for Dallas hasn't made a single NFC title game and he's been in the league 10 years. Jaydin Daniels has been in the league once. So this just goes back to what I was saying 2 weeks ago when I, commented on Dak Prescott's, what he commented on how they are close to competing with the Eagles. They're not even close to competing with Washington right now, let alone Philadelphia. Philadelphia is another animal. We understand that. Super Bowl champions, the works. Philadelphia is the creme de la creme, as people would say. But looking at it now, when it comes to Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys, they don't even have the talent that can keep up with Washington right now. Washington's making moves already, and it just goes back to what I was talking about last week. If you are Washington, I would just continue to add pieces, more offensive firepower. Surround Jaydin Daniels with as much talent as possible. You grow your Super Bowl window at that point in time. And Jaydin Daniels has already all the intangibles that you want going forward that can possibly deliver not just one Super Bowl, but multiple Super Bowls. So I think that the Deebo Samuel trade is probably going to be one of the biggest trades of this offseason easily, and might not even be close. For a 5th-round pick, you get Deebo Samuel and that talent that he brings to the table as probably the NFL's best Swiss Army knife that can play at any receiver position and at running back. That's a no-brainer for me. So Washington, I commend Washington a lot for that because, I think they needed to make more moves because, they're knocking on the doorstep of the Super Bowl. And, they delivered big time with this trade. I don't necessarily know what San Francisco is thinking. I personally would have asked for at least a 3rd-round pick for Deebo Samuel, and I still think it would have been worth it for a 3rd-rounder. But now going forward, what do I think that Washington should do? I think they should add more wide receiving depth. You have Terry McLaurin. You have Deebo Samuel now. I think one more receiver, maybe a running back, and a tight end. I think they go offense heavy in this draft. Their defense is pretty good. Now, in the later rounds, I think you can find some diamonds in the rough when it comes to defense. There's one player that I would keep my eye on, and that's Donovan Ezeraku, defensive end from Boston College. I think he's going to be a steal of the draft, depending on where he falls. I know he's not going to be a first round, but second or third, I'm willing to bet that someone's going to get a steal because I think that guy has all the intangibles to be a great pass rusher in the NFL. So, with that being said, we have the Washington Commanders who have just kicked off this NFL offseason really with one of the biggest blockbuster trades that you can ask for right now. A 5th-round pick for Deebo Samuel. San Francisco, we'll see how they turn out this year, but we're going to get to San Francisco at the end of this, and we're going to talk a little bit about some rumors going around. But right now, Washington is still getting locked and loaded to make another Super Bowl run in Jaydin Daniels' second year, and they just traded a 5th-round pick for Deebo Samuel. All right, so I'm going to talk about my team real quick, the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is where I'm going with this. Pittsburgh has so many issues. They really, really do. I honestly still don't know the plan when it comes to the Steelers and what they plan to do on offense. I seriously still, to this day, do not understand how a old, brittle Ben Roethlisberger looked more competent than a young Justin Fields behind center. And Russell Wilson, obviously he's older, but, I can see why he did not work in Denver. I don't know how he had such a far drop-off from his MVP caliber quarterback play at Seattle to Denver. Obviously, I don't think the team helped him much or the head coaching staff there. And then obviously in Pittsburgh, he had a small resurgence, but again, I thought it was the right move to put Russ in over Justin Fields because, like I talked about, I was at the Dallas Cowboys and Pittsburgh Steelers game in Heinz Field. While Justin Fields, he wasn't playing bad up to that point, but he wasn't necessarily playing great at that point in time in the NFL season. It's not that he was awful against Dallas, but he basically did nothing to try and help Pittsburgh win in that scenario. In that game, I watched him miss throws that were just easy layup kind of passes that you would expect most NFL quarterbacks to be able to complete, and that kind of sold it for me. I was a fan of putting Russ in after I witnessed that in person because it just was not impressive whatsoever. And when you look at the entirety of Pittsburgh's offense right now, they have good players, but it doesn't feel like they have great players on their team, but it doesn't feel like a great team. It doesn't feel like a team that's capable of being great. And that's mainly because of the offense. Now, I have my issues with the defense, mainly the back end and the linebacking core. I have no issues with Highsmith, Watt, Cameron Hayward, any of those guys. Those guys show up, and Watt kind of, slipped up at towards the end of the year, but who can blame any of those guys on defense for looking somehow the way they did? They knew that they had to play their absolute best, their perfect game in order to win games at that point in time. There was no help from the offense, really. Russ started to become more turnover prone. You got George Pickens being a diva on the sidelines. The offensive line not holding up, costly turnovers left and right, and then, the capstone is just getting absolutely steamrolled by the Baltimore Ravens in the wild card round. Don't even let the final score fool you because that was a bloodbath for Pittsburgh. That wasn't even competitive. My point going here is there's so many issues to address on Pittsburgh that I don't even know where to start. Quarterback is an issue. That has been an issue since Big Ben retired. They failed to address it years before Ben retired, and they had no succession plan afterward. People thought it could have been Mason Rudolph, but obviously, no, it wasn't. That wasn't the case at all. Wide receiver talent, you have George Pickens, who, and here's the thing, I still like George Pickens, but I'm getting sick and tired of him at the same time. He reminds me too much of Antonio Brown, but less talented. See, even when Antonio Brown was being a head case, that Facebook Live in the playoffs, talking about how they were going to beat the brakes off of New England in the AFC title game. By the way, they lost nearly by 20 in that game. You know, Antonio Brown still showed up. He still was on trajectory to be a better wide receiver than, he was going to be looked at as comparable to Jerry Rice, and he was for the early portion of his career with similar stat lines like Jerry Rice. But my point is, George Pickens is starting to act like him with less talent. So that's a problem. Running back, I like Najee Harris, but he just doesn't do it for me. Jaylen Warren, I like and would keep him. Cordarrelle Patterson, in my opinion, he was a rental. I think he could still be a great returner. But again, Pittsburgh has Calvin Austin at wide receiver, which is another piece I would keep. Mike Williams, he's okay. Like, he's nothing spectacular, but he's okay. Roman Wilson didn't see a single snap this year because of his injury. So it'd be nice if Pittsburgh got him healthy again and actually be able to see what he's capable of. Pat Freiermuth, we're okay at tight end. And Darnell Washington, I'm okay with both of those for Pittsburgh. The offensive line needs to get healthy, fast, quick, fast, and in a hurry. And when you look at the defense, the back end, I like Beanie Bishop, and I kind of like Minka. I don't really like anything else that we got. Joey Porter Jr. has a bad holding problem. That dude loves to hold left and right. Now, I think Joey Porter has a lot of upside still because he's still on his rookie deal. But that's one thing that he has to cut down. He has to actually start acting like a corner and stop grabbing people left and right and getting flagged for pass interference every single series. I swear, it was like every time I looked up at the screen, Joey Porter Jr. is getting a flag for pass interference or defensive holding. That's the reality of what I saw. And the linebacking core, Patrick Queen turned out to be a bust. I can understand now why Baltimore didn't want him on the roster anymore. He was a pain. And a lot of that defense, and I like Minka, he's not a ball hawk. He's nothing like what he was in the early years he was in Pittsburgh. He doesn't really do much other than supporting the run game. It seems like Pittsburgh gets burned so many times on deep balls and just by good quarterbacks in general. It's like they can't figure out how to stop good quarterbacks. So as far as Pittsburgh's concerned, I know a lot of Steelers fans say it's the quarterback's issue, it's a quarterback issue. I don't necessarily just think it is a quarterback issue. This team has holes all the way around this team. This team has holes everywhere, and maybe for different reasons. Pittsburgh fans need to understand it is not just quarterback. It is scheming. It is play design. It is talent acquisition. It is all those aspects that Pittsburgh is lacking. And I'm not saying that the quarterback's the most important part, because it is. But you got to put everything in context. They didn't succeed much because, one, the offensive line has been a carousel ever since Big Ben retired and Marquise Pouncey retired and David DeCastro moved on. And, all those great offensive lines that Pittsburgh had throughout Big Ben's career, they all retired or got traded or left in free agency. There is context to everything. Context to everything. Pittsburgh has so many issues to deal with. I do not know how they address it in the draft. I already told it once. I'll say it again. You send Minka, you send a skill position player, you send 2 first-round picks, and you go get that number 1 overall pick. You trade Justin Fields, you trade Minka, you trade maybe Mike Williams and 2 first-rounders to the Tennessee Titans for the 1st overall pick to get Cam Ward. The start is getting a quarterback. Stop trying to build a team before you get the quarterback. Get the quarterback right first, then build the team around that. That's how you should build a team in the NFL. All right, now, as we finish up the show today, we're going to talk about one rumor that I've been hearing lately, and it's actually kind of fascinating. So, there's a prediction right now, and I got this off of sportingnews.com. So, there is a rumor, and it was an article written by TWSN's Marissa Myers, is predicting that the 49ers are going to opt to trade Brock Purdy to the Tennessee Titans for the number 1 overall pick. Okay, so looking at this, now obviously it wouldn't be Brock Purdy straight up for the first overall pick. I assume that the 49ers would send a haul, but Brock Purdy be put in with that said haul to Tennessee. When you look at this, if there's one thing I know that Kyle Shanahan is still great at, it's pretty much working with any quarterback that has ever been in his system. Kyle Shanahan works wonders with good quarterback talent. The only one that didn't work was Trey Lance, and that was obvious from the jump when he got drafted. But now, when you look at this, what could San Francisco possibly be telling us if this rumor turns out to be true? Again, disclaimer, this is rumored right now, but after reading this, I legit see the possibility that this happens. A lot of NFL teams are not sold on Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, which, okay, that's understandable. If you don't like the quarterback, you don't like the quarterback, and you're not just going to draft him just because you need a quarterback. Unless you're Cleveland, because they used to do that, but that's neither here nor there. But when you look at San Francisco, what was the main thing that plagued them last year? Obviously, injury. And there's a lot of people out there, myself included, who do not believe Brock Purdy is worth the contract that he's going to be seeking. I wasn't okay with Dak Prescott getting that contract. I'd be more okay with Brock Purdy getting that contract if it wasn't so much. Brock Purdy in my opinion, is better than Dak Prescott, but he is still a middle-of-the-pack quarterback. I still think he's a B to B, B- to B+ range quarterback at best. I do not think he's in the class of an A quarterback. I don't think he's in that, Patrick Mahomes class, and not even close to the Patrick Mahomes class, not even close to the Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Matthew Stafford. No, I don't think Brock Purdy's even remotely close to that, and I don't necessarily believe he deserves that kind of contract from San Francisco. And it's been rumored for a while that the 49ers were going to pay Brock Purdy. Again, nothing has matriculated yet, but when you look at this as a whole, would you personally give, let's say, the 16th best quarterback in the league $50 million a year? I sure wouldn't. Look how well that turned out for Dallas. They gave Dak Prescott the bag. They backed up the Brinks truck for that man. And in Dak Prescott's career, he has 2 career playoff wins. That's it. Brock Purdy is a more accomplished quarterback right now than Dak Prescott. And he's younger. And, still relatively cheap, but not for long. So if I'm Tennessee, I'd actually consider this. I would 100% probably do it. If you are so unsure about what you're getting with Cam Ward or Shedeur and you're not sold on them, even though you desperately need a quarterback, you can't run it back with Will Levis or Mason Rudolph for that matter. So what's the next best option? Well, if the 49ers come knocking and offer Brock Purdy, I would take that deal for the first overall pick, because at this point, I think that the 49ers, if they had the first overall pick, it wouldn't surprise me one bit if they drafted Shedeur or Cam Ward. Then they would be set for the foreseeable future at quarterback. Obviously, they got Brandon Ayuk still. Christian McCaffrey, very injury prone though. They got good defensive pieces. Injury prone, again. But looking at it going forward, I think it solves both teams' issues. 49ers, I don't believe they really want to pay Brock Purdy $50 million a year. I don't believe that they do, and I don't believe that they think they should do that. Tennessee, let's say they don't want Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders. Well, they can solve their quarterback issue because I think Brock Purdy, like I said, he's a B to B plus quarterback. It's not that I don't like Brock Purdy. I don't like him for $50 million a year for a middle of the pack kind of quarterback. It's already proven that you can get to a Super Bowl with Brock Purdy as long as you surround him with good talent. He did it once. He almost did it twice. So why wouldn't you if the Titans accept this? You solve your quarterback issue right then and there. You get a haul for that first overall pick. You trade back. You can get more weapons for Brock Purdy, shore up the offensive line, add more defensive pieces. And if you're the 49ers, yeah, maybe this upcoming season might be, a little bit disappointing, but you got your quarterback of the future, and then you can start to build around him. So the more I look at this rumor that's going around, I think it's a win-win for both teams at this point. I don't see an issue with this at all. Even though, in my opinion, I like, as a talent perspective, because we haven't seen him in the NFL yet, Shadur and Cam are better talents than Brock Purdy. There's a reason Brock Purdy was drafted very last in the NFL draft years ago. There's a reason for that. There's a reason he was not a top 10 pick. There's a reason he wasn't a first, second, or third round quarterback for that matter. There was a reason. But it was proven if you surround Brock Purdy with the right amount of talent, you can get to a Super Bowl. And honestly, you can probably win one because they obviously couldn't seal the deal against Patrick Mahomes, go figure. But I think this is a win-win. The more I look at this, the more I see a win-win scenario when it comes to the 49ers and Titans. If the rumors are true that the 49ers are interested in sending Brock Purdy to the Titans for the first overall pick. And that's going to wrap it up this week on The Lake Show, everyone. I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day again. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave some comments down below. I'm your host, Dominic Lako. God bless.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's